feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We are brought to you by Prize Picks. Coming at you Sunday morning. It's June 29th, and we're recording on a Sunday because Naz Reid signed a 5-year, $125 million new contract over the weekend. And we want to touch on that before any of the other sort of free agency chaos kicks off, kind of today or this week, just in general. We are, I think, fast approaching some news on the other Wolves free agents today. Again, June 29th, as we're recording this, is the day that Julius Randle needs to make a decision on his player option. I wouldn't be shocked if we got some news on that even in the next hour here while we're recording this. And then Nickeil Alexander-Walker's unrestricted free agency begins on Monday. So that's coming up here too. And I think given the interest that he has around the league, I wouldn't be surprised if we get some news on that very early in the free agency process. The second round also happened since Thursday evening when we last recorded. We haven't done a pod since then. So let's talk some Rocco Zikarsky, who the Wolves took with the number 45 pick. We'll talk about how they kind of slithered down the second round, somewhat bizarrely, from number 31 to number 45. I got Kyle Theige here with me to run through all of that. What's up, Kyle?
Happy Sunday. Happy 89th birthday to my grandma Rita. And happy, I think, official start of free agency. I just woke up today and Naz Reid is here for 5 more years. LeBron James might be on his way out, and Malik Beasley. Look it up. What's up, Dane?
Yeah, that was a weird. It was a weird notification to get. We'll just leave that one.
I bet we won't talk about it. Let's just put it that way.
Yes, he is not on the Timberwolves. Let's start with Naz. Yep. 5-year, $125 million contract. There is a player option in the final year of that deal. Remember, Naz had a $15 million player option for next season, which he declined. We talked about a lot of maybe opt-in and extend options for him as that kind of being the cheapest way for the Wolves to proceed. Naz proved to have more of a market than that, and they decline the player option altogether, and this is a brand new contract that they signed him to with his bird rights. So it's 5/125, and I think they're going to still kind of determine what the money is. You can kind of slide that $125 million front loaded, back loaded if it makes sense. I'm assuming it's going to be back loaded, and for our purposes, I think that it's the best way to think about it. Is the cheapest, lowest salary he can have for next season is $21.6 million for next season, which is a little bit more than again, that 15, which was the very best case situation for the Wolves. His other opt out and extend option would have started at 19, but again, his market was bigger than that. So it's going to be $21.6 million for him next season. This is the latest I have with the spreadsheet up here. Kyle, there's the financial part of it. I actually don't think there's too much we need to get into about how much space the Wolves have left there. They do have some space below the second apron. But just initially, your thoughts when this goes down on Friday night, reaction to the number, and then also just some, reaction to the idea that Naz is under contract through what will be his 11th year in the NBA. Obviously, the longest tenured Timberwolves player. How did it hit you?
It was exciting, right? I don't know we can get into what does he still have to work on in his game. I think I harken back to when Ant signed his extension in Vegas a couple of years ago, right? That was before he led the league in threes. So I know there's been a couple people that are like, well, he kind of got cooked by Kuminga in the second round, or, his defense needs to get better. I think all those things are true for Naz Reid, but he's also still 25. He's one of 11 players technically on the roster who are 25 or younger. That includes my guy Spagnuolo, who I have no update on, but I'd like to find out. And also, it's just, the number, I'll get it back to you on the number because that's more of a you thing, but I kind of heard like earlier in the week that the team felt really, really good that they were going to get this done. So when you started to see people like, oh, the Celtics are ready to throw a bag, or it sounds like Mark Stein reported that the Pistons were like ready to throw a bunch of money at him. So if he would have got out there on the open market, he would have had, I think, plenty of suitors, even though a lot of teams were limited in how much they could spend. So it's a good story. I mean, again, like the whole, he's the longest tenured Timberwolves player. I know that sounds cheesy to some. I don't really think it's cheesy. I think that's part of the whole culture and continuity that this front office and this new ownership group harken about every day. Like, we love continuity. We love continuity. And I also think too, this kind of like my Hallmark card vibes moment, but for like all the young guys on the team, like they do have a bunch of young guys. Ant and Jaden kind of are removed from this, but the Terrence Shannon Jr.'s, Jalen Clark's, Rob Dillinghams of the world, you kind of just use Naz now. It's like, I don't know if NBA teams, Dane, have captains, but Naz might be the captain of like this guy. I don't want to say he came from nothing because he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, going to LSU. But I mean, to go undrafted and then to get a contract like this and have a career like this to win a 6th Man of the Year award. I mean, he's kind of up there now with like the best undrafted basketball players of all time. I mean, Fred VanVleet, I think, is up there too, right? And he had a title. But so you can kind of point to the younger guys and be like, you know, you don't want to run those extra sprints. Like, look at what Naz did. Like, Naz is the best developmental story. And for them to get him back in the Rosas tenure, we should admit, but like to get him for nothing and turn him into this, and now he's a 5-year, $125 million, I would say, foundational piece of this franchise. And you pair him with Jaden and Ant. And are those the 3 best players, as Bill Simmons would say, on a championship team? I think that's to be determined. There's a lot of development you still need, but you got those 3 guys, Ant, Jaden, Naz, under contract for the next 4 years, and they're 23, 24, and 25. You could do a lot worse than that.
Yeah, let's just run back through the story quickly, or I will. He's undrafted, so he initially signs a 2-way contract. Again, very little money locked up there at the beginning. The 2-way contract gets ripped up before the season starts, and he signs what I think originally coined the term Gupta special for, as it pertained to the Wolves, where it was a 4-year contract, but only the first year of it was guaranteed. So he kind of had to literally every single year earn even that guarantee to get the minimum, you know, that he was getting. I mean, the first 4 years, he made like $6.4 million, which, you know, again, ton of money to you and I, but in the context of the NBA, it was peanuts. It was the smallest amount that he could have earned in that time. And then at the end of that, he becomes an unrestricted free agent after those 4 years. And there was demand for him on the market. This is pre-6th Man of the Year, right? And I know Cleveland offered him what was heavily in pursuit of him. The Spurs were back then, and he opted to do what he did, which was sign a 2-year, or it's a 3-year contract with the Wolves for $42 million, but up that player option on the final year of it. And the whole idea from Naz and his camp was to get back out on the free agency market when he was 25 years old in his prime. And it's just interesting how this whole CBA kind of came together in literally in that time period, where the idea was like, well, you know, summer of 2025, like the teams are going to have all this spending power, enter like the second apron and this new collective bargaining agreement, and all this stuff happened that seemed that it was going to have some depressing market, you know, impact on him. And, you know, we were getting to the point of talking about maybe he does opt into this player option. I don't know who the other teams are. Like, you can talk about Detroit there, but Detroit only had a pathway to offer him like 17 million in cap space, you know, with what they had. There just wasn't, sure, a lot of teams wanted Naz Reid. Not a lot of teams had the ability to offer him a huge contract. And I think that reality kind of started to set in for Naz and his team over the course of time. And I was thinking about this last night. I remember being in the locker room like the day the Warriors traded for Jimmy Butler, you know, before a game or something. And Naz was like, it was me and somebody else were standing there, and he's like, what was that Jimmy Butler contract? Because remember, Jimmy signed like the $120 million contract extension. I was like, yeah, it's $120 million over 2 years. And he was just like, whoa. And I was like, pretty good summer to be a free agent, Naz. And he started laughing there. This was his time, to get paid. It was he put in the time to do it. Had some of those, those market factors or whatever that maybe depressed it, but I don't think what it comes out as 125 does not strike me at all as the Wolves squeezing him and taking advantage of that market. They factored in the market. I think they had this was the higher end of obviously of what they were willing to do. They didn't want to go over 22 million for the first year of the deal is what I'd heard. And again, you can, if you scale this, it can work in that way. But they did give that. They gave that to him, and now you have him back. And there are those other softer values that you're talking about, the proverbial C on his chest, and what he does mean as a developmental story, what he does mean, I think, as a personality in the way that he connects Jaden and Ant and all that. And there's real human friendship stuff there. So yeah, I look at the number. Is it a little bit higher than I thought that would have been reflective of the market? Sure. But I get it overall. And I think that Naz, that was smiling about the Jimmy Butler contract there, was thinking about $100 million, and he got his $100 million. And he didn't get it over 2 years like Jimmy Butler, but Naz Reid has been paid. And I mean, there's no more even stories to tell about the work ethic and stuff like that. You just look at a picture of him when he was drafted, look at a picture of him today. The body of work speaks for itself there. I just think it is a cool story, and I don't think it's done yet, man. I think Naz is 25. He hasn't even been a starter in the league yet. There's a lot more that we're going to see and learn about him as a player here over the next few years. What is it going to look like when you are consistently a higher minute player and someday starting? And those questions still remain, but the Wolves made a bet on the idea that he's worth every penny of that he's a future starter in this league when that opportunity presents itself. I know that gets into Julius and a lot of other stuff there too, but yeah, man, I think it all makes sense to me. And just as Naz being a guy that, I've covered this team for 8 years. She's been there pretty much the entire time I've been doing it. It's the human part of it's cool, and to watch it develop.
This portion of the podcast was brought to you by our friends at Cove Wyzetta. I'm totally with you on that. And, one thing that someone in the Wolves front office told me, but this is just kind of, I think, a good thing to understand in all sports free agencies, is that typically when you sign these contracts, it's not about past performance. It is about what we kind of expect you to do moving forward. So 5 years, 125, was Naz a 5-year, 125 guy in the past? Probably not. Or on the fringe, borderline, whatever. He did win a 6th man of the year. He's been very productive. But this is more of an investment, and this does kind of tie into the Julius stuff, which, again, at the timing of this podcast, there is no update on the player option, but that's like starter money. You know what I mean? 5 years, 125 at 25 years old, a power forward who fits, I think, really well alongside Rudy Gobert. Historically, that duo has been pretty good. You draft some other tall centers that seem to maybe pair with him, and we'll get into that later. So I think this is kind of without having to call him into the office, Andrew Wiggins style, and look him in the eye. This is a bet on, okay, the greatest developmental story in franchise history went from this to this. We now expect him to go from, this to even better, right? And if you are scared about the annual average value or something, go look at some of the other guys that are in that. There's a lot of guys that are, I think Dylan Brooks might be in that range. It's I like Naz Reid more than Dylan Brooks. So there's a lot of guys.
There's even worse guy. Dylan
there's
Brooks,
way worse.
Yeah.
I do think it's again, and the vibey part of it is that you have these 3 guys, or some of these guys that really do enjoy playing together, and I think that helps just eliminate a lot of the bullshit that becomes prevalent now in this league. So It's a huge moment for him, though. And I think you nailed it by just saying he did kind of, I was looking at my video I had from 2 years ago when he signed an extension, and it did seem, when he gave me the answer of like, I love it here, and these fans and the towels and all that stuff, like he wasn't really Naz Reid yet, and he did kind of take a hometown discount. This was him, back to your original point, which, by the way, like I've seen some people ask us, this wasn't the 5-year, like the opt-out 5-year 125. That wasn't really something we ever talked about in the spreadsheet pod, right? Because that, like, did this seem
we were
like
just talking about extensions.
Okay.
Off of that number. I mean, he has been on the team for 6 years, so I mean, he could have signed a max contract, right? Like,
right.
I don't know. Maybe we should have done. I did. I guess I didn't know that was the perception. I thought that was a little bit implied that he could do it. The extension would have been, to keep the number. Those were routes to do this on the cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And really take advantage again of the market and what it was. And the number wasn't that much more than that. It was close. It was close to that. I just think, like, honestly, man, I'm not sure he's on the team if this collective bargaining agreement thing isn't what it's been and the second apron didn't exist. Because if it's a different summer, man, there's a ton of teams, not a ton, but there's numerous teams that could offer him 25, 30 plus mil a year. And I think in a different summer, the former 6th man of the year who's done what he's done over the past couple of years is still 25 and going forward. I don't know, man. I think the second apron saved Naz Reid here because I don't think that this, if it would have been 30 million, I don't think the Wolves would have retained him. And if it wasn't this 2025 summer where the market is so weird and the only team in the league that could offer him that without it being a sign and trade was the Brooklyn Nets, I think it would make sense that he would go take that money elsewhere. And I don't know if that's me kind of trying to polish this 125 number. I don't think it is. It's just my read on the situation that there at least would have been bigger offers in a different season. And when we do this thing, 4 years from now, we're like, okay, Naz Reid's player option is coming up. I think we're going to talk about this. Like, man, remember how weird that 2025 offseason was? It like kind of got Naz to stay in town. Because in a different world, if this collective bargaining agreement didn't come to be, there's just more spending power out there, and the likelihood that he was not on the Timberwolves for the next 5 years would be a lot higher.
Just a little CBA for dummies like myself. I guess what I was trying to say is that this deal, 5 years, like opt out 5 years, 125. Back to your original point, like this is Naz kind of winning, right? I mean, the Wolves get to retain a really, really good player, but if the Wolves would have won, it would have maybe been that opt in and extend, and you kind of bring that number down, and the next season would have been like 15 million or whatever. So Naz did, in a sense, win the negotiations. He got his $100 million. He got 5 years with that player option at the end. So, but again, big picture for everyone. I know the people that make the decisions for this organization are excited about the continuity, about having these three guys that you can kind of build off of and lean into. And also too, the Jaden and Naz stuff, like, are they, back to my Bill Simmons question, like, are they the second best guy? Like, can they be your Jalen Williams, as we just saw in the finals? I don't know, right? Like, maybe that's your third and fourth option, but they do kind of combine those two salaries to make like max money. So as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, breaking up that sectional, down the road, as this still, I mean, it's a huge day for Naz Reid. And a year ago, whatever, it was a huge time for Jaden McDaniels, but this is still Anthony Edwards' team, and the formula is to find a way to, put all the dominoes in place so he can win a title. You do have, in my opinion, and back to what you just said about maybe he's making less than he could have on an absolutely different CBA. You got some movable contracts way down the road if you ever have to, because they're broken up into really healthy. These are guys who make, the 55th most money in the league. And that's kind of how these trades are now working. So congratulations to Naz Reid. And I think, again, just like we saw with Ant, they're now expecting him to take another leap and stacked on all the leaps he's made in his tenure here.
Today's show is brought to you by your home improvement company. We know there are a chunk of you out there who have home improvement needs that you need to get taken care of this summer. as always, your home improvement company does have a deal going on triple pane windows. Buy two, get two free. They got their bathroom deal going on, 30% off all bathroom renovations. But it could be anything at your home improvement company. Will take care of it. It will be done by with a lifetime warranty and carried out by certified professionals. Their bathroom renovations are also done by certified local professionals and are backed with that warranty. Whatever the project is, your home improvement company offers great financing deals that require zero money down, zero interest, and zero payments until 2026. If you have a home improvement project, we would love it if you contacted your home improvement company by calling 866-777-YHIC or by going to yourhomeimprovementco.com. It's your home improvement company where it's your home made better. And today's show is also brought to you by our longtime friends over at Prize Picks. And even though the NBA season is over and we can't give you, Naz Reid more than 12.5 points or this or that, whatever it might be, we don't have Wolves picks for you, but there are WNBA options up there to create a lineup. MLB, soccer, tennis, golf, a ton of different stuff. They've got the 4th of July hot dog eating contest even on there, more or less hot dogs. It's just a fun thing to do when you're sitting around watching sports, maybe over the holiday weekend. Check that out. And if you do not have an account, take advantage of their best promotion, which is their new user bonus. All you have to do is put in the promo code DANE when you sign up for an account, and you will receive $50 in lineups when you place your first $5 lineup. That's prizepicks.com or the PrizePicks app. Use promo code DANE when you create your account for $50 in lineups when you place your first $5 lineup. I think what this clarifies for us, now
back to the Excel spreadsheet. Let's
from
go.
a free agent, from a free agency standpoint, is we have a variable that we now know in Naz Reid, right? And his number, again, if they do the 8% raises, be about $21.5 million. That's what I have in the spreadsheet up there right now. So if you look at the bottom left of the screen, that says the Wolves have $5.2 million beneath the second apron. And I want to highlight the taxpayer mid-level exception. That's for $5.7 million. The Wolves, if they stay below the second apron, have the ability to use that to sign a free agent. I haven't heard that they for sure will or anything like that. But when I look at this spreadsheet now, I look at that $5.2 million number and I go, okay, with a little bit of carving, you could get to like 5.7, or maybe you sign somebody and you don't have to give them the whole 5.7. Maybe you just give them 5 or something like that. And I think that could end up being an answer for a more immediate, I don't know about like rotation player, but I was thinking a bit about it kind of like the Monte Morris role from 2 years ago, where
He
it's
waves
like
a towel around and he jumps up during threes.
Yeah, but like it's kind of the 10th man at the same time, you know, and I say that to mean maybe like a point guard. We got to see how, again, this market shakes out and what some of these guys say. I don't want to list off a bunch of dudes and be like, Dane said they were going to they could maybe get them for $5 million and then they signed for 14. But, you know, there's some Tyus Joneses out there and stuff like that. If the market, again, creators for him or other players like him, again, in sort of a Monte Morris type of way, you theoretically could bring him in or bring in a player of that caliber. I mean, the taxpayer mid-level exceptions for $5.7 million. It's about double what a minimum contract is. So a lot of guys who are free agents right now trying to not get a minimum are trying to sign this taxpayer mid-level exception with a lot of different teams. So my point is I think the Wolves can play in those waters now, provided that they let Nickeil Alexander-Walker go. That's we've been kind of in all the other spreadsheet conversations we've been talking about, we've been kind of like optimistically penciling Nickeil in for like 14 million or whatever. And if you throw 14 million on this right now, the Wolves are already into the second apron and all that. So let go of the taxpayer mid-level exception. But the idea, I think now, is if Nickeil is gone and he signs with Atlanta or Detroit or something like that, and Julius opts into his player option at that 31, and you don't bring back like a Luka Garza now you're in sort of that taxpayer mid-level area, whilst being able to stay beneath the second apron. I will note, and this is a little technical, but you see that 5.2 million number there. It doesn't factor in incentives. Julius Randle has a $1.5 million incentive for next season. Dante DiVincenzo has a $750K incentive for next season, and Jaden McDaniels has a $1 million incentive for next season. That's 3.25 million in incentives that you have to factor in to this here, because they do count for apron purposes, whatever. So I'm just saying that you see this 5.2 million on the screen and people are like, oh, okay, you just got to shed like 500K. And now you got the taxpayer mid-level. No, you do need to navigate those incentives as well. So I think bringing in, again, I say a Tyus Jones, a Luke Kennard, there's that kind of, like D'Angelo Russell's going to sign with Dallas for this number. You would need to let go of a Garza Minot, something like that. But they do, that pathway is open. And I would, if you're eagerly waiting for the Wolves to do something in free agency, I think this is the more logical path of a reality that comes to fruition, more so than a trade for Darius Garland, or you know what I mean, something more along those lines. So yeah, play around with potential free agents that you think might sign for $5-6 million. Yeah, I think the Wolves are, at least from a dollars available standpoint, in that market, provided Nickeil Alexander-Walker goes away and provided Julius Randle doesn't add more money onto his 2025, 2026 number. If that has happened since we started recording this, then rule this out. But if Julius stays at a reasonable number and Nickeil's gone, yeah, play around with $5-6 million free agents that theoretically could come to fruition.
Yeah, and just a reminder again that we are recording this on Sunday morning, and there's a very high likelihood that by the time many people listen to this, the Julius news will be updated. So, but everything still stands. 20-minute mark on YouTube. Go check out Dane's spreadsheet because that has all the accurate information. And now Naz Reid, white giant numbers for the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. You wanna go to second round of the draft?
Oh God, do we? Yeah, I'm ready. What do you want to talk about?
I mean, I thought it was actually interesting from a less so interesting from a Rocco Zikarsky standpoint, even though I do think he's going to be fun. I think he's just going to be fun from like, I'm really like at summer league or preseason and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, it's 7'3" without shoes. I was going through the combine measurements from, that they have on NBA.com of what guys were measured at. And I saw 7'3" without shoes. So I just was like, looking for other guys who were that tall. And in the last 20 years that measured at the combine, only 2 players measured taller than that without shoes. And it was Zach Edey, who measured 7'3.75, and Taco Fall, who was like 7'5.5 without shoes. So we were literally talking about one of the tallest players in NBA history to be joining the Timberwolves, and certainly in recent NBA history. And I think that's going to be fun because he's not just, he shoots it a little bit, like he moves a little bit. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a fun player to watch. But none of us had Rocco Zikarsky on our radar really, because we were expecting the Wolves to do something with the number 31 pick. We thought that would be the range that they were picking from. I can play that clip from Tim, you and I were texting about, but just like in general, what was your sort of thought process as you're seeing this going, and the number 31 pick is up for bidding all day on Thursday. And then the Wolves eventually trade it for 36 and number 36 pick, and then 2 future second round picks. How did you kind of, how are you processing that one in the moment?
You want to talk about the second round? That's way more fun, because I think actually we could nerd out over this. The second round was like extremely intriguing at various different points and levels. I thought you wanted me to talk about Rocco's game. Don't really know. I just know that he's really tall. Yeah, I mean, my first reaction was, and the audio clip that Dane's going to play in a little bit is like really telling, but I thought the Wolves kind of learned on the fly, like something bad. Like that was about, when you play the audio clip, that was about the most frustrated I've ever heard Tim Connelly kind of knowing him, because when I think of like the NFL draft, it's like if you have the first pick in the second round, you kind of run that day and everyone's calling you and they're just throwing all these offers at you. So I was like, okay, 31, 2-day draft. They're going to just have all these people dying to come up to get like Rasheer Fleming, and it's going to be this thing. And as you talked to Tim after the second round, I think they kind of learned that it wasn't necessarily a free market or a draft, that a lot of the stuff on day 2 was already pre-planned and like agent driven.
Yeah, it was interesting. And, in the moment we're doing this right after the draft and asking the question, I don't really know what's going on with the pick. And frankly, I was kind of disappointed with the return of it all. It's like, wait,
Same.
what?
Yeah.
And what I've learned in doing this for a while is when things don't make sense or things we read as, quote unquote dumb, it's usually because something got effed up along the way. Something, and that's not always true. I don't think something weird happened with New Orleans doing it, but that's because I don't think New Orleans has a smart front office. So I say this to mean when their front offices that you believe are smart, and I think Tim Connelly's crew has earned that right to be believed as that, and then deals happen and something bizarre happens and you really end up coming out of this with just cash. You kind of go, what happened? That seemed dumb. But Tim gets into it a little bit here about what got effed up. And I also took it as Tim being quite frustrated with how it went. So Jace asked him it's about a 90-second clip, but I think it's all worth playing and listening to.
Can you just take us through the process tonight of moving around the board and obviously trading back and then trading back again with someone with the cast considerations and everything?
Yeah.
Kind of what goes into that.
I mean, it was done with our present roster in mind. We have some free agents we want to retain. Certainly we have some first, second apron issues that we want to be cognizant of. So there was players we really liked, but you can't get draft fever and just add. So when we kind of looked at the board and we were aware of what the offseason might look like, and it essentially starts in a day or two, we thought moving down and picking up assets that are down the line, assets that hopefully we can utilize either with a pick or in a trade. So, we've obviously traded a lot of picks. So any chance we have to kind of restock some of the pick inventory that we were lacking previously, and also just keep those things in play. Draft night's so much fun, but sometimes it's like when you buy a car. I mean, you drive it with a lot, you lose half the value. So we want to keep as many balls in play. So it was fascinating. Again, I think it was fun. The second night is kind of weird though. There was as the day progressed, we've never had the 31st pick. It's fairly new. It was really curious how agent driven the second round became. I think we called players left and right, and there was 20 deals done before the draft even started. So it was fun. It was interesting. 31's fun, but it's maybe not as fun as we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Is it?
So, Kyle, what I think he's describing there is the agents figuring out a loophole in this. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense. The first year of the 2-day draft was last season. And the picks are going so fast. Normally when it was a 1-day draft and it's like, okay, first round's over, go, and now it's like 3 minutes between picks or whatever. And you just don't have time to kind of assess the land and really as an agent, try to leverage your player in one direction or the other. And again, from the player and agent side, it makes more sense to land in certain destinations than others. And people might be like, well, why wouldn't you want to play for the Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards, this and that? Well, it goes into all the stuff of like state income tax, and if you're the Wolves or if you're an agent and you're looking at the Wolves, you're looking at a team with a deep bench of young players. Bingo. And you're looking at a team where the GM or president of basketball operations said on the record to us at his exit interview before the draft, at the end of the season before the draft, he was like, we're interested at guys at 17 and 31, their original picks, but we have a lot of young guys on our roster who we believe are ahead of those players. And if you're an agent who has, some 23, 24-year-old player or whatever who wants to play right away, that's not happening, in Minnesota. So I think I would imagine some of that is what was leveraged, and the agents found a way to, I don't know, maybe it's a little scummy, but like, there's way scummier stuff that goes on than that, in this world. And I think, I think Tim's a little pissed about it, and they got kind of caught being the first team to have the number 31 pick in the first year that agents had kind of learned how to, play this game a little bit differently.
And that's the thing, right? This isn't the first year of the 2-day draft, but it's the first year of the 2-day draft with a year of experience on how the 2-day draft works.
Exactly.
So that's kind of what happened with Tim. And also, too, when you talk about, we're, again, for the last time recording this Sunday morning, I woke up to one of the first videos on Twitter being Rich Paul, a client or, who runs Clutch, talking to Matt Ishbia of the Suns about like, hey, let me make some calls to see if Malawach, the kid from Duke, can fall to 10. So when you say a lot of sleazier snake oil stuff happens, like it was probably happening in the lottery. And I think it did kind of get a front office in Minnesota that historically has also kind of, I think when you say the word loophole, I think of last year when they were like, we don't really have anything other than minimum contracts. Why don't we just trade up in the draft and go get a point guard? Because that's really the only way to handle that loophole. So go back to the second round quick. 31, they trade it. They move back 5 spots with the Suns so that the Suns can go draft Fleming, who a lot of people liked. A lot of people also didn't like. So that'll be kind of something to put a pin in as a fan and be like, okay, how does he develop in Phoenix? But they get 2 second-round picks for going back 5. That's just a home run, right? Like, that's just a win. I don't really know any other than if you were a draft expert and I love that one player. To get 2 seconds to move back 5 spots is a home run for a team that has very limited assets. Then from there, right, they fall back again 10 spots.
Not a home run. Yeah.
Not a home run. They get cash considerations. I am going to do my best to figure out what that means at some point, because a lot of people, especially in this fan base, I think got triggered that this is the Kevin McHale, David Kahn. Like, they're just trying to essentially get money for Mark and Alex, or like cash consideration. Like, they're just trying to find the way to pay for 1% of the new arena. That's not my understanding of all this stuff, but anytime you get cash considerations, I feel like you lose the trade, like every time, because that's just a team that's like, it's a funny little add-on in the text to be like, oh, and we got a bag of money.
Yeah. I mean, it is just a bag of money. That's what it was, probably like $3 million or something like that. And that is, that's a disappointing thing to turn an asset into, something that's just cash. I get that. That's a fair reaction from them. And, I don't want to, seem like the guys that are, we just had Mark and Alex on the podcast this week and like, oh, we're defending them. Like, the idea though, that they are overall operating cheap, I think is inaccurate. You could label this a cheaper move or a money earning move, but they just spent $100 million.
But they just doubled 1.5 billion in valuation to 3.5 billion. You think the $3 million, like, that's
I think it just got messed up with the trades and the agent stuff and that, and they got they ended up with that. And at 36, you're probably signing a player to an actual roster contract. At 45, like the second half of the second round is basically turned into the 2-way contract draft. And Zikarsky's on a 2-way. And that's different than theirs. So there's a lot of factors in that, but I would look at it in the aggregate, or if you want it to feel better, look at you traded 31, you got Zikarsky, you got 2 future second round picks, and you got cash considerations. I think in the aggregate, that's not, terrible, particularly if we mix in a little bit of agents predetermining stuff there. I don't think that in the aggregate is a poor return. Is 36 for 45 in cash considerations not a great trade? Sure. It's not, exactly. It isn't. But in the aggregate, I don't think to your point, I'm not sure it's worth getting overly fired up about in a negative way, because they don't have roster spots really to be able to do this and stay under the second apron. What if drafting Zikarsky and having him on a 2-way rather than drafting, I don't know who is available at 36, but they had to sign an actual contract. Well, now you've taken up that last roster spot, and the taxpayer mid-level exception thing we were just talking about, maybe you can't do that then, because you don't have the roster spot for it. So let's look at it in the aggregate. But if you look at it, that 36 for 45 in a vacuum, don't be pleased about that trade. But neither's Tim.
Right, exactly.
He's pissed. Like, he didn't like that trade either, man. Like, So it just kind of is what it is.
I think that's a good way to put a bow on it, though, right? Because in the moment that night, having to like, okay, I got to strap in now for a second night of a draft that is so boring and everyone's putting on different hats that don't align with where they're going. I think everyone was like, this is like a D- way to use what we all thought was a really good asset.
Sure.
And a lot of times, I think you said it better than I could. Like, if you ever wonder, like, that's dumb. Well, sometimes I might have just got fucked up behind the scenes and they also think it's dumb. And I felt better waking up Friday morning being like, I don't think they did any of that right, even though they got what seems like a promising prospect who about 9 months ago was ranked, I think, as a potential lottery pick in Rocco. And then you get 2 seconds. Like the 2 seconds to me, I know are kind of boring. And we just lamented how shitty the second round is, but having that asset or those little pieces are going to be big at some point down the road. But to find out that Tim was also pissed about it, kind of was like, okay, I guess we're all just pissed. And we all kind of got the rug pulled over our eyes. So, and again, like the Rocco thing, I haven't scouted him enough yet, but you do add another intriguing piece. You have him on a 2-way. It does kind of seem like in the second round, especially from 40 to 60, you're trying to get guys that will come here, back to your original point of having roster spots. And that guy has, I think, been training in Minnesota with one of the Jones brothers. And like, I think he was willing to be here and kind of have his next couple of years. That's tough, right? I mean, in the AAU, NIL, all that stuff now, all these guys think they should play and be good. And Rocco just seemed like, I'm just happy to have you guys tell me what to do for the next couple of years, and I'll just keep working on my game.
Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. You went to Falling Knife to watch the playoff games when they were going on. Maybe you went there last Wednesday for the draft party. We just want you to know that Falling Knife is constantly putting on events. I would recommend following them on Instagram at Falling Knife BC. They put a nice little graphic up every week of like Monday this, Tuesday this, whatever it might be. But they sent me the schedule of events before. I want to kind of let you know for this 4th of July week, first and foremost, that they will be open on 4th of July, but only from noon to 6 p.m. So maybe you can head over there before going to see some fireworks. They also have baseball-themed trivia on Sunday night, something to check out there as well. And then, as always, the Lynx games are always on in the tap room and the projection screens with the sound on. So Wolf season or not, we would love it if you kept Falling Knife as your go-to brewery in Minneapolis. That's Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis. Today's show is also brought to you by Adriana Lonick at Coldwell Banker Realty. And if it is time to buy or sell your home, you know, Adriana is where we would love it if you went to take your realtor needs. All you need to do to learn more is go to thedancingrealtor.com. That's up on the screen. That's in the show notes before. Or you can call or text Adriana at 715-304-9920 to book a free strategy session. I know a handful of listeners have done this over the years that we've worked with Adriana and bought and sold homes through her. With that strategy session as a little perk, those of you who do sign up for a free strategy session, you're entered to win some free Wolves tickets for next season, and we will randomly select someone who has worked with Adriana to get some, or had just had a free strategy session with her to win some free Wolves tickets. Again, if this is you, you're thinking about buying or selling your home, go to thedancingrealtor.com for more information, or feel free to call or text Adriana at 715-304-9920. Book that free strategy session. And like I said, mention this podcast and get entered to win a pair of free Timberwolves tickets when you do book that consultation. There was a related to the money spent. I want to play this clip too, because Tim was asked specifically about Lorian Rodriguez and spending and luxury tax and all that sort of stuff. And I think this is he does a good job of highlighting here a reality in this luxury tax environment, the second apron environment of, it's not just about spending, it's also about using restraint to not handcuff yourself into the second apron and limit the transactions that you can make. And that was part of the motivation here too. But again, when something doesn't make sense, it's usually because there's a handful of other things going on here. And I think another one of the ingredients here is them trying to use some restraint from a money and roster standpoint, not necessarily to save money, but to allow themselves some financial flexibility to be able to go there. So here's Tim Conley.
Willingness and ability to pay that, not just this year coming up, but future years.
I mean, those guys are go-getters. They're unafraid of risk, even having the draft room tonight. More. Let's take chances. I think the real impact, easy for me to say because I'm not writing the checks, of the second apron is beyond these huge financial penalties, is it's really hard to transact. So we have to figure out, we have no restrictions relative to building a championship level team, but we have to figure out how do we self-govern ourselves. With this, you get the second apron, you can't aggregate, it's got to be dollar for dollar, you can't take cash back and trades. There are all these things that the whole league is learning. It's still a fairly new CBA, so there's nothing that we won't have at our disposal to build a championship level team. And relative to the dollars, I think it's more, is the cost justify it, and can we transact in a way that allows us to stay flexible?
That makes sense to you, Kyle? Like just some of the restraint that they need to use there being a factor?
I think it's the most important clip or thing we've talked about in this whole pod, because one of the things, again, I was disappointed with how the second round went down. I think so was Tim Conley and everyone in that front office. But any CBA like prior to this one, if you shed salary or you did anything like this to move down 10 spots to get some cash, you were deemed to be cheap because, yes, luxury tax existed in previous CBAs, but you could just go to the moon and just write a fat check. And we saw the Warriors kind of do that, or like a Steve Ballmer thing. But this new CBA, shedding salary or like trying to move down 10 slots in the second round because there's a multiplier of how much tax you have to pay, that's actually like, you have to do it. And I think Tim has been very upfront about, whether it be old ownership, new ownership, the combination, or now just new ownership, like they want to spend, they want to be aggressive. But as front office members, and this is like rare, right? Usually ownership is like, no, you can't do that. I know you have a great plan, but we're not going to spend. It almost is like Tim Conley in the front office is like, hey, guys, like everyone's got to slow down with their checkbooks because if we continue to be a second apron team, and Bobby Marks lays this out really well, like you just hit a point where you can't do anything. I don't even think you can like sign guys that are waived, like around the deadline and all this stuff, and your picks get frozen. Again, things that you and I are still kind of learning on the fly, but there's just real things where all of a sudden you become basically hard capped and your team is just this and you can't do anything else. And I think Tim knows, even though we're all learning the CBA, I think he has adapt that we can't have that happen. I mean, he's been very vocal, even in exit interviews, like, if we can get under the second apron for a year, that'll help us be more flexible and ability to build a stronger team moving forward. So yeah, it's not fun when your team just keeps coming down. Like the NFL draft, I always think of like just keeps trading back and trading back and trading back. It's like, just take someone. But in this situation with the guys on the roster, the lack of playing time probably available for any of these guys in the second round, and the financial stuff, it does make it a less harder pill to swallow. But still, I think everyone involved is like, that was a disappointing second round after a pretty exciting first round.
Yeah, it's just interesting to think about like what is the value of the flexibility, because even like it could be a thing. We were talking about this taxpayer mid-level thing, and what if the Wolves, whatever it shakes out, and they got $5-6 million and free agency is over, and it's like, well, why didn't they bring a player in for this taxpayer mid-level exception? Like they could, but if they do that and then they bring in that player, the Tyus Jones I brought up, and it pushes you all the way up to that edge of the second apron. Well, now as the season starts going and the trade deadline comes around, or any sort of transactions during the year, adding somebody, buy whatever, like you just don't have that flexibility. Now, is that flexibility worth more or less than having a solid rotation player at $5.5 million? I don't know, but it's not nothing either. So it's one of these things where it just kind of comes down to the point of like, and I'm not judging this. I do this all the time. Like, do you want to put your own GM hat on and think about how you would do it in this and that? Or do you want to rely on what we believe to be a smart front office and an ownership group that is giving them financial power to do so, which I think as a fan of a team, what more can you ask for from the people who are running your team? If you have that, then just, enjoy it and see what it is that they end up, doing there. That's why I always try to present this stuff of like, here are options of what they can do. And a lot of the times when it seems like, a logical thing is not chosen to do, it doesn't mean that Joe Dumars is your owner or your general manager and doing something crazy. Yeah, who knows? But But yeah, I don't know. That's available there. The second round happened as it did in the moment. And now still you're not blown away by what they did. Neither is Tim. Let's see what it all looks like in the end. But I think it is fair to still believe, or take Tim's word for it if you don't believe ours, that they do have this ability to, or they don't have restrictions on what their spending is to put a championship team together. And I think that's what they're trying to do, and they're trying to handle this whole thing out of order. I always think it's so weird that the draft happens before free agency. Like, if you're the Timberwolves, wouldn't it have been nice to know exactly what was going on with Naz Reid, Julius Randle, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker before you went into the draft? It's just a silly order of operations thing there too. Sometimes stuff gets missed in that, or you go, oh, if we could have done this over and would have known that Julius would have been this number and Nickeil would have been this number, maybe we handle the draft differently. But the draft comes when the draft comes, and you can, I guess, just play the cards that are dealt to you there. But end of the day, Rocco Zikarsky out of the second round. He'll be on a 2-way contract, and I think playing in Summer League with the Wolves.
Oh, that Summer League roster might make the playoffs in the East. That I'm so excited for Summer League. And the Summer League schedule has come out. I don't have the actual number of dates on me, but I think it's like a Thursday. The Wolves kick off Summer League this year in a Thursday afternoon game. Then they play on
against
Saturday.
Joe Dumars and the Pelicans.
At this rate, Joe Dumars is gonna have to suit up and play point guard for them. No, just going, and again too, I get it. I think the new ownership thing, now that it's done and it's behind us, I think those guys understand too. Like, now you're the owners. Now everything, like Tim said, I'm not the one writing the check. Like, that'll go to those guys, and we'll see if there's a time down the road where they do try to, I guess, be quote fiscally responsible. But it's hard for me to get super worked up about a second round where you're trading back a couple times and saving a little money when then a day later you give $125 million to Naz Reid. So they clearly are okay to spend. But you said something about the timing of the draft and then free agency. I think that was an interesting thing. And I guess I'm just lobbing this to you, but they had 2 picks. They come out of it with 2 players and 2 future picks and a bag of money, but they're both really, really tall centers who seem like projects, and not in a way that, maybe one of them gets a little run this year, but more likely down the line of these will maybe be the center options when Ant enters his prime. And I'm just curious, the first thing I thought of was, at this moment before free agency starts, does that signal to you, as much as it did to me, that maybe there's still a firm belief in that building for Rob Dillingham? Because they didn't really sniff a guard, and they were like, we're just going to go get bigs. We're light at the guard. We have a really old point guard, and a really young point guard. But I thought that instilled some belief in me that they have a lot of belief still in 19-year-old, 20-year-old Rob Dillingham.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's been my read, the whole season. I mean, I think Rob was probably frustrated with how little he played, but not devastatingly so. I don't think their view, and Tim said as much when we interviewed him, and Matt Lloyd the night before, that their belief in Dillingham they're still super high on him and excited to see him in a more real role next season. And that's, again, I think that real role we're going to be able to stop sort of hypothesizing about and really practically putting together into our depth charts when we're looking at it, if and when Nickeil Alexander-Walker signs somewhere else. Because when that notification comes through and he's on the Pistons or the Hawks, if that's what ended up happening, or some other team, then the 8 starters are down to 7. And it's time to add to that rotation, and that probably means multiple players entering the rotation. And between Dillingham and Clark and Shannon, I think they feel confident that they can fill up the Nickeil role, sort of piecemealed together and in different ways also than Nickeil was. I'm very high on Nickeil Alexander-Walker as a player, but very much understand that there's things that Rob Dillingham can do right now that Nickeil Alexander-Walker never has been able to do and never will be able to do either. And those things, that ability to break down a defense, get into the middle of the floor, create shots for himself and for others, is is a belief that this front office has, that Finch has too, that now you're going to be able to get to see in practice more and hit like actually out on the floor and games, and starting with Summer League. Like, let's go, Rob. Like, let's see, be one of the best players in Summer League. And I think that's their expectation. And frankly, I think it's mine too, that he really stands out here along with Terrence Shannon Jr. and that other deep young group of guys that this team has. It's time for us to turn our focus up on Rob Dillingham more and better understand what he can bring to this team next season.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing for Rob Dillingham would be that he doesn't play more than 2 games in Summer League. You know what I mean? Because he has that much of an impact. Like, oh, okay, he's been cooking behind the scenes. We don't want to risk any sort of injury. So, yeah, I think I'm with you that it's a year removed from when he was a lottery pick, but I think now the light shines bright again on Rob and what he can do in Summer League, because you normally do see guys in their second year just with a year of seasoning and getting stronger and learning basic NBA concepts that they do kind of show out in Vegas to a level where it's like, okay, he's good. We'll throw him into the mix next year. But yeah, it just kind of brings me back to the idea on the Rob thing, or like Mike Conley is under contract. He is very much still the point guard of this team, or will be a point guard of this team. Just want to remind listeners, I'm very anti running it back 100% of what it was last year. I think the next time that we do a pod, you and I, Nickeil Alexander-Walker will have signed for a crazy amount of money, like more than we've even talked about. But he won't be here. But again, like, you could still have, in my opinion, a lot of the same guys on the roster next year, which would then trigger this PTSD of the running it back. I just think it's who gets to play, right? Like, even if Mike's on the team next year, maybe they put Mike on the 41 game path and they say, Rob, you're going to start a lot more. Dante, like, I want to see different guys get a chance, and it starts with Summer League. But yeah, the Jalen Clarks, Terrence Shannon Jr.'s, Rob Dillinghams of the world, like, those guys now really need to have an opportunity. But yeah, just kind of back to like the 2 centers thing quick with Rocco. I know you and Tyler Metcalf somehow did an hour and 15 minutes on my guy, Baby Baguette. But like, what do you think about them getting 2 center prospects?
Well, you tell me. What do you Beringer? Let's do Beringer. Let's talk about him. Where you and I haven't done one since then. Where are you at on him? And I got a Tim clip on Beringer too that I want to play.
Well, listen, I don't want to come off as like Tim Connelly could slap me in the face and I'd apologize, but he has done a lot of good for this team. But that's exactly what I wanted. I was texting you all night like Thomas Sorber, and then he goes to the Thunder, and I was just as sad as one could be. But the Beringer thing, just watching the clips, listen to Metcalf talk about it, I don't like player comps. Like, I don't be like, oh, that guy's Derek Lively. But I've always wanted like the idea of Derek Lively next to Ant in his prime. And that would ask Ant to become a lot better at like throwing lobs or running that. I mean, if you gave Ant Derek Lively right now, he wouldn't look anything like Luka does, because Luka just understands all the little minutia of how to run that pick and roll and to get the ball to him at the rim. But I just kind of wanted that young Clint Capella, rim running, super athletic. I think that is kind of the next, as you're trying to forecast out, right? Like, who are going to be some of the best bigs that Ant is going to have to go through moving forward? It's Wemby, it's Chet, it's these super athletic, rangy 5s. They can shoot on the perimeter, but also do a bunch of crazy shit offensively and defensively. So I was really hyped by the prospect of that, because I also just think that they believe in Rudy Gobert more than people do coming off this last playoff run. And that if Rudy's going to be your center for another year and chew up a lot of regular season minutes, then you can give Beringer a year to kind of season and develop, because I don't think he's ready to play right now. Like, we'll see what happens in Summer League. He just, again, the whole part of learning to play basketball 3.5-4 years ago, he's going to need a little time. I don't think he's Bruno Caboclo, where he's 2 years away from being 2 years away, but I don't think he's ready to be a rotation guy in October. And to me, again, that signals this idea of continuity. Like, they're trying to set themselves up, right, Dane, for the future, but they're not trying to, hey, we're starting Terrence at the 3 and Beringer at the 5 come October 15th. Like, that's right. They want to lean into what got them to the Western Conference Finals last year and then make tweaks around the edges.
I talked about the lob threat element with Tyler when we did the reaction pod to the first round, and you know, that's been a frustration I think a lot of people have had, is Ant's maybe not inability to throw lobs, but unwillingness at times or resistance to do it. And I think a lot of that, some of it is the not having the Luka computer brain processing power completely dialed all the way in. But that's a I think can be a learned skill. And we've already seen Ant develop in a lot of those processing ways. I'm curious about him having experience with a lob threat 5 that has good hands. And every scouting report that you would read on Beringer is really good hands around the basket, on the short roll lobs, whatever. And I think there's a potential for value in Ant getting like morsels of this worked, understanding through trust. You know what I'm saying? Yep. Of like, oh, there is a power in this. And maybe it's not going to happen on the floor in games. I'd be very surprised if Beringer is in the rotation for this team. But there's practice, or even there's Rob Dillingham. There's just stuff like that. They didn't have a big on the team, on the roster last year, even in practice, that was this archetype that could do this consistently or was worthy of the trust there. And I wonder if we look back again a few years from now and go, remember Ant at the beginning of his career never threw it to Rudy for lobs. And then in comes the highlight reel of like Ant to Beringer, like I think that is a very, very much could be a reality. I think Ant is a hands-on learner in the sense of he finds things that works and then he duplicates the process. I think that's how he became an elite shooter. I just think that's kind of his learning style in a way. And the more I thought about Beringer, I was like, that just might be an advantage, not just for Ant, but for the whole roster of like, this is a 5 who can do this. Rudy's not going to catch him as much as Beringer does, but maybe even just subconsciously because you've thrown Beringer a couple of them and you got Rudy rolling down in the same motion, and it just gives you a little bit more trust in the action overall, and thus more trust in Rudy there. I really think this offense would benefit from a lob threat, but more so than that, trust in the idea of throwing lobs. So I'm very curious to see what that is with Beringer. He is so young, and it's not going to be immediate or anything like that. But there's I think there's like some external upside to that, just adding that skill set to the roster.
Ant definitely has that quarterback brain where he's like, if I throw you an end zone fade and you don't go get it, like I'm not throwing you the end zone fade anymore. And Rudy, just for whatever reason, they've never connected, right? I think it's a 2-person, it's like a relationship.
Not never, but we probably diminish it a little bit too much. Me too. But yeah, continue.
Also, just Jesse Edwards erasure, just the fact that like he probably could catch lobs in practice. But I just think that if Ant, in a practice setting, because I'm totally with you, there's a lot of other guys on this roster that need to play probably before Beringer, but he throws that first lob and he just goes out of nowhere to catch it and finish it, a la a Derek Lively. I would imagine Ant will get so hyped that he'll be like, I love doing that, right? I will add that as my new part of my game.
Couldn't you see that? Yeah.
And also, totally too, like, I mean, Rob didn't play much last year, but I would imagine that Rob is top 3 on the team in throwing lobs because we've seen it. Like, I saw Rob throw as many lobs to Rudy Gobert last year as anyone else, other than maybe Mike. So, yeah, I think it's just a really exciting pick. It is, again, if you're a fan and you're like, hey, we're in the Western Conference Finals and we got pummeled, like, shouldn't we go get another player that can really fit in now? And I think that goes back to Tim saying we just got other guys who are in line. If Terrence and Jalen Clark and Rob like all double their minutes or triple their minutes next year, like you just have no place, right? You have no place for Rasheer Fleming to try to fit in. So why not get a guy who, and this is the cheesy part, but like I think the fact that he just learned to play basketball, is from France, can literally come over here and just hang out at Rudy's house and learn a lot about that stuff. I mean, we can't talk about how Naz is so important as a developmental piece and what he can do for the younger guys and then not be like, hey, if I was coming over at 18 from France, I would like to hang out with a guy who is from France who did all the stuff I did playing basketball. So I think that'll be big. And then, yeah, the Rocco stuff in the second round, I just think they had a type. They know that they still need really long centers to protect the rim, grab rebounds and stuff as Ant continues to develop. Because, again, when Ant is in his prime, like his real prime, 27, 28, Rudy Gobert's likely not on the team. So what are the answers at that position that pair well with the guy that you probably just signed yesterday or on Friday to be maybe the power forward of the future long-term in Naz Reid? So cool draft. But it did to me when I thought about it the next morning, my first reaction was the Rob stuff. It's like they didn't even sniff a guard,
Sure.
or at least that's what we thought. So they believe in the kid that they went out and invested draft capital in last summer to go get. I think that's pretty big for Rob and his confidence.
And theoretically added another first round pick who should play well with Rob Dillingham. And that isn't just to the offensive side of the ball as a lob threat. Beringer should be extremely helpful guarding pick and rolls that Rob Dillingham is the defender of the primary defender of the action, right? Not only because he's a good defensive player already, he's also versatile. And that's what really stood out to me watching Beringer, the clips I've watched, playing up. He can switch that. He's fast enough to come out and show and recover, and just has a greater willingness to do that than Rudy Gobert does, because he has a body that's more built for that. We know Rudy can switch and handle it there, but Rudy is an elite drop coverage center first and foremost. Beringer, the part we do know is that it very much looks like he is going to be the type of five who brings you defensive versatility. And when we asked Beringer or asked Conley about Beringer's game, that was the thing that he talked about as being the known
that he can do now as guard. It's a very tough league. That league's produced a lot of really good players. Countless NBA players have gone through the ABA League, and his ability to guard not just five but all over the court. He's one of the rare elite athletes vertically and laterally. So I think he's going to hang his hat on defensive versatility, and offensively, we don't know what he is. He's right now he's a sprint the floor, he's a lob threat, he's an offensive rebound, kind of a garbage guy around the rim. But it's really exciting, and especially because we have such great coaches, is he's really malleable. So however we want to develop him, we can develop him. He's coming from a great development school instead of Vita. They have great coaches. It's just exciting to see a guy that has all these crazy tools and really no bad habits.
It's high praise, man. That's high praise from Tim, and that's the bankable thing, right? I think offensively, saying you don't know what he is going to be is saying he might not ever be a great offensive player, and that's okay. There's still going to be a lot of utility in what he brings defensively. Hopefully, some more offense develops there, and he's a offensive rebounding machine, and he can hit a little on the move rolling floater type piece there. He can catch the ball around the basket and finish there. He can dive from the corner, and maybe even someday be able to take wide open threes. Like, you can't rule that out right now because he's 18 and just started playing basketball. Shot doesn't look like a shot right now, but I don't, it's not like that hard of a bar to cross in the NBA today of being a center that takes like one or two wide open threes a game. Like, once we crossed over into like Valanciunas letting them rip, I was just like, okay, this is, this is a world where if a player works on it and they're a five and you want to be able to play five out, like, that guy needs to be able to, take the wide open ones and make them like a third of the time. I think, that's not like a great number, but I think if you feel comfortable in your five being able to take those wide open, it at least allows you to play five out some. And maybe that's part of the vision with him, because like Matt Lloyd described him as a ball of clay. There's a lot that they believe that they can internally develop with him. So I'm fascinated to see it in person at Summer League, but this is going to be a long-term play, and what we see in Summer League is not going to be anywhere near the product of what he becomes 2-3 years from now.
Yeah, offensively, the dream, right, is for him to even just have a 0.5 3-pointers made square on Prize Picks, just so you can even bet it, right? It might be a red demon, but no, I think the best word to describe him, again, his story, as you and Tyler broke down, is like he just started playing basketball a couple of years ago. He's a soccer guy. Like, I've had a lot of people text me their thoughts on his hips and his hip mobility. Like, he is just built differently and kind of that modern, I keep going back to the Derek Lively stuff, but the malleability of, I always wonder this, like we're on the therapist couch now, but you bring a guy like Rudy Gobert who's won 3 different Defensive Player of the Year awards and he's been awesome at all this stuff. It's like, it's probably harder to tell him at 28, 29, like, can you now go learn this? Whereas with this kid at 18, it's like, they're just going to tell him a bunch of different shit. And like, yeah, he might take a couple threes in Vegas in a couple weeks and they might not hit the rim, but that's, again, as you get excited for Summer League, they're going to have a really good team, but it is not about winning games. It is about development and trying to figure out, test new things. So I think he's going to be a sponge. He seems like the Tim Connolly type of just a really good dude who is ready to learn. And again, like you watch some of those clips, man, he sprints. A lot of Timberwolves players don't run in transition still. And he's going to be good at that. And yeah, I do think he is, in their eyes, ideally kind of the modern center as we navigate the 2020s to pair next to, again, Rob Dillingham. They didn't draft a guard, but also what does Rob Dillingham need on his team if he's going to be a focal point or a focal point, not the focal point? Bigs to protect the rim, to grab rebounds, to set screens, and to be lob threats. Like that is also going to help Rob's game because I think he's really talented at that. So yeah, 2 big guys. What did Tim Connolly say? 14.4 feet of center. Both from international. They do really well. They have such good relationships. You could even hear it, Tim, as he's like praising coaching staffs of other leagues. Like that's just marketing 101. But yeah, they have good relationships overseas. They have great scouts and they bring in these 2 guys, neither of which will help them come October, November, December, but they also might be focal points and core pieces of this thing as you kind of navigate the next couple of years.
Introductory press conference for both Beringer and Zikarsky tomorrow morning, Monday morning, at 9 a.m., which I think is maybe another clue that we're going to be getting some Randle clarity here coming soon. So we'll see this again. The order of operations, I think, of the offseason are very funky, and we're putting this puzzle together as it kind of develops. But that's the next thing. I think the next action is this player option for Julius Randle, how they end up handling that. Press conference the next morning, we began to meet Beringer and Zikarsky and see what that is. Then there'll be, I mean, a lot of the young guys have already been here for weeks that are going to be playing in Summer League. That kind of starts rolling next week too. I think from a real practicing standpoint, find out who the coach is, find out who everyone is on the roster. I think that'll all probably come on Monday. And then Monday night is when Nickeil Alexander-Walker officially becomes an unrestricted free agent. So still some moving pieces here, but I feel like we've covered most of it. Do you have anything else?
No, I just thought it was cool as you get to, you might ask this tomorrow at the press conference, but these 2 young international centers, both, I mean, maybe it's because they got drafted by Minnesota, but they both reference like, I want to be like Rudy Gobert. I want to play like Rudy Gobert. And I just thought that was an interesting insight to how like international the perspective is on Rudy Gobert, because nationally in this country, like he is a punching bag no matter what, right? No matter what his resume is.
Oh boy, we got it right now.
Breaking news. An hour
news.
and 9 minutes into the Dane Moore podcast, the best podcast covering the Minnesota Timberwolves. Dane, why don't you take it away?
3-time NBA All-Star Julius Randle intends to sign a new 3-year, $100 million deal to stay with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Sources tell Shams Charania at ESPN. The deal includes a player option for the 27-28 season. So, thinking on the fly here a little bit, I think that would keep that number relatively close to the 31 that it's at. Then it'd be 33 the following season, 26, 27, and then be a player option for 35 million the next year. But I think, 100 million there means that the Julius number is right around that 30, 31. So the things that we were talking about earlier, they have that little bit of flexibility below the second apron. And it means obviously retaining Nickeil Alexander-Walker would rocket them into the second apron. So I think we can probably let that one go. How do you just feel about Julius? 2 more years and then player option that 3rd year. Maybe it is 3 years.
I bet you wish you were at a bar again. These things tend to always break when we're the least expected. But no, awesome that we got to talk about it right now. I would imagine that once I look at my phone, their reaction will be negative because this will signal that the team is essentially, as I just talked about earlier, running it back. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't think that the Wolves are going to punt on July and just be like, all right, we built our roster, we're good. I would imagine they're aggressively looking at other ways to upgrade the point guard position. There's still a lot of tradable pieces, but I just think with Julius, that's a pretty good number, right? Like it's about 30, like you said, 33 a year or whatever. I guess we'll get the details here soon, but you can't, and maybe tell me if I'm wrong, but like you can't lose assets on a team that has very few assets. Like they have a lot of good players, and Matt Lloyd wanted to make that known. And I said they have 11 dudes under contract or on the roster that are 25 and younger, but I don't know if you could just at this point lose Julius into the abyss for nothing, like we joked about at the trade deadline. I think they needed to retain the asset. It seems like a healthy-ish number. So I'm okay with it, but I'm more focused on who Chris Finch gives minutes to rather than who the Minnesota Timberwolves give money to.
Yeah, so I think it is an extension. So that would be with the player. Whatever. We gotta figure that out there as it goes. There are going to be people who are frustrated with that, and Julius Randle, I know, just isn't some people's cup of tea, right? And they don't believe that Julius Randle is the second best player next to Anthony Edwards, whatever. And if you're of that mind, and I think there's elements of that that are reasonable to feel that way. Look what happened in the Western Conference Finals. Even in the most, like, looking at the glass half empty, that is still a contract you said there that is $30-some million that if and when they want to go get another player, the next Kevin Durant thing comes around or whatever, 30, 40, $50 million player, Julius Randle could be that. And there is some asset value in just holding on to that big chunk of money to be able to use. Having that big chunk of money allowed us and to play around with different potential Kevin Durant moves, right? We're talking about, okay, there's Gobert is the main money in a package. What would that look like? Okay, if it's Randle in the package, what could that look like? This gives them, they're going to need to upgrade this team over time and adjust what the team is, and having contracts to be able to send out to players in deals is very important in today's salary cap environment when players are typically or almost exclusively moving via trade and not via just straight up free agency like it used to be. So I don't think it's a ridiculous number. I think they can function with that. I think they're going to be able to function as under the second apron with that number this year. But it's not a bad number or not a terrible number, and I think it gives them some optionality going forward. This is kind of what we talked about, and 3 years isn't that distant into the future either. So will that be like his 31, 32, and 33-year-old season, or maybe he starts at 30 this year? He's not going to be like well out of his prime or anything by the time the deal is over. I think it's good that it's not a 4 or 5 year deal for him just because he's older. Whereas Naz, you don't mind 4 or 5 years because he's younger there. So yeah, Julius Randle, I think it is going to look a lot like running it back. I mean, I just think that's what this is.
And if they think, and I don't think they believe this, but yes, they're running it back with a lot of the same players. If they think internally that we'll just coach them up the same way and we're going to go year 2 of the 8 starters and we're just going to keep pounding a circle peg through a square hole, they're not going to make it any further than 5 games in the Western Conference Finals. And I don't think that that's what they think. But this is, and I hate that we do this. Like, I hate the new CBA for so many levels because it used to be more fun when it's like, oh, they have an empty spreadsheet and now they can just go do all this fun stuff. This is the way to build a roster now in the modern CBA, is that if you want to, recklessly speculate about going and making a big trade, you need contracts. It's not about just, we'll take, your Kevin Durant at $55 million and here's a bunch of picks. It's about having $25 million Naz Reid, $30 million Julius Randle, $25 million Jaden McDaniels. Like, those are the ways. I mean, the Dante contract, like, that is the sweetest filler of any potential blockbuster you try to do. So They are running it back in terms of most of their roster. We will likely see Nickeil Alexander-Walker sign in the next couple of days for a ton of money on another team, and that'll just upgrade a spot for one of the younger guys to play. But the one thing I take away from keeping Julius and keeping Naz, also, I joked about Cove Wayzata, but like, you don't think Tim Conley has talked to Naz Reid about like, hey, you're going to sign up for all this money, but here's your role. Like, those are the conversations that happen. I don't think Naz is shocked by the Julius Randle contract extension.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Right. And that might have been some of the extra juice on that Naz contract too, of like, hey, we're probably bringing back Julius, but this is here too. And and maybe Julius isn't here for all 3 of those years, and Naz is then starting in 2 years or something. I mean, let's see how the Randle, how this thing ages. I think generally speaking, it's pretty good to have players not with ambiguous contract futures. I think there's value in having players sort of locked up. So that's not I think they struggled with that some last year. I think Naz, Julius, and Finch struggled with those two likely entering free agency and competing for a lot of the same minutes. Obviously, Finch and the two of them navigated that functionally, and it worked. We didn't really hear about anything crazy happening. So I to your point, I don't think this sneaks up on Naz Reid at all, and he's still 6 starters. He's still here.
I don't think you and I are going to turn 40 one day, and it's going to be a front court of Naz, Julius, and Rudy Gobert. Like, this is just one of the steps in building a roster. It might be, disappointing for some that wanted to see massive change. And again, like, I harken back to when Karl-Anthony Towns was traded while I was trying to fly back from media day. Like, it was, a lot of things can change. And I think this front office has shown, maybe now with all these contracts signed early, and you kind of know now your formula, and you know what your spreadsheet looks like, and you have the ownership stuff behind you, and you know that Tim Conley is likely to sign an extension at some point. Like, they can lean into now who are the best players to put around Anthony Edwards, because as complicated as all of this CBA and salary cap stuff is, Minnesota's job is pretty easy, man. Like, let's just find the best guys to build around number 5. And that's, they got one of those guys this last draft. A lot of teams looking for that guy. Dallas, they're trying to find their guy. The Wolves have their guy. And all of these moves now are just, do they short-term, long-term benefit Anthony Edwards? So, big news weekend for the Timberwolves. I'm glad we were recording. I'm glad we filibustered long enough to get that Julius nugget in there. But I don't think it's going to get any less exciting. I think it's still going to be, I think they got some wiggle room. I think they have some flexibility to try to maybe upgrade the point guard position to help Rob or whatever. So I expect some more stuff coming. But big week in Timberwolves land, man. We did a lot. We talked about a lot, and I'm going on vacation.
We'll talk more about this new Julius Randle contract over the course of this week. We'll do a show probably on Tuesday, kind of reacting to the press conference, and do a little bit more on Reid and Randle as we further wrap our heads around that. Maybe we'll get Britt to join us for that one. But yeah, they kind of wrapped it up. And I'll just say, if this is the last podcast I do where Nickeil Alexander-Walker is still sort of on the Minnesota Timberwolves, just really enjoyed covering that guy as a person, but also think he's much like Naz, and you and I talk about that all the time. It's cool. It's cool when guys who are kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel come to a team and find their way, and both Naz and Nickeil did that, and just kind of the human interest story part of that I've enjoyed almost as much as I enjoyed the development of both of those guys' games over the time that I've been around them. So yeah, shout out to Nickeil, and if this is it, go get a bunch of money from somebody else so they have less cap space, and enjoy it. So
that's how I feel about Luka Garza. If this is it, it's been a wild ride, my guy. But good luck. Jesse Edwards, good luck. We'll be seeing you down the road. But yeah, big weekend for the Timberwolves. I'm sure big weekend news. And then, yeah, Summer League, you and I will be there. So if I don't talk to you again before that, I'll see you in Vegas. And a lot of exciting things coming for this team. And I'm excited to see the young guys ball out.
Yes, sir. All right. He's Kyle Theige. We will do another episode later this week. probably Tuesday with Britt. It'll be coming out to discuss more of these signings, talk a little bit about the press conference, and then hopefully nothing else too crazy happens over 4th of July weekend, because it will be 4th of July weekend, and I will be out of town as well there. But we'll navigate all of that, and then Kyle and I will be in Vegas the following week at Summer League to hang out and take it in, and I'm sure we'll do a couple pods while we're out there as well. So until Tuesday for the next episode, he's Kyle, I'm Dane. Peace.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hard so you can find me in the crowd.